This episode contains discussion about sexual assault and domestic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Today, we're getting into the 5th episode, titled A Vile Hunger for Your Hammering Heart. On this episode, I get to talk to Kalyne Coleman, who plays Louis' sister Grace, and Hannah Moscovitch, the writer behind episode 5. Hello, everyone. We are here with in front of and behind the camera queens, Kalyne Coleman and Hannah Moscovitch. Hello, ladies.
Hey.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Kalyne, will you tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
My name is Kalyne, and I play Grace on Interview with the Vampire, Louis' sister.
And Hannah, will you tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
I'm Hannah Moscovitch, and I'm a writer in the Interview with the Vampire story room.
Now, before I get into my hard-hitting questions, because I'm nothing if not ruthless, okay, move over Diane Sawyer. My first question for both of you. If you were given the chance to become a vampire, would you take it?
Oh, man. That's a good question.
That is such a hard question.
Okay, you have not talked about this on set multiple times?
Never. I've never thought or talked about it. I mean, it's so wild talking about this in this context with Grace here, because Grace is why you don't become a vampire. Like, it's because you lose your family. And like, as soon as you ask, I'm like, my son is 7. I can't be a vampire. Yeah. I have to be his mother, right. You know? And the loss of Grace for Louis is so, it destroys him.
Mm-hmm. You know what though, Hannah? Listen, if Grace were to get bitten, they could live into eternity forever. So I would say on some days, Kalyne, the actor, would say, absolutely, I'd be a vampire. But on most days, no, I don't know how good I'd do with the blood and everything like that. So,
Right. But I do wonder sometimes, I'm like, do you think vampire blood, like, do you think eating people, like, their blood is slimming? Like, would that be a quick way to just get snatched? You know what I mean?
I think so.
Just a little bit?
I think so.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on with your metabolism when you're undead. I'm also a TV writer, but it's comedy, so, you know, we're not that serious. We don't have the skills that drama writers have. We just come into a room and mostly look at YouTube.
You guys have more skills. Like, comedy's harder, I think.
Oh, I know. I don't recommend it. But tell me about the process of getting on the show, Hannah. How did you pitch yourself as a writer to showrunner Roland Jones?
Yeah, I'm a misfit choice. I'm a weirdo from Canada, you know, and he read one of my plays. And then he called me in for an interview, and I was like, I don't know why you're talking to me. But
and did you say that in the interview? I don't know why you're talking to me. Is that it? Are you kind of like negging? You're playing like hardball with him?
I was like soft killing it. I was like, isn't LA full of writers? Isn't America full of writers? And he was like, and you're hired.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I did know Anne Rice. So I had read her when I was a teenager, which, you know, then you have like this deep spiritual teenage connection to work that you read when you're a teenager. Like you're so emotional about it. And honestly, I had read a lot of Anne Rice's like pornography, her erotica. So I had like, I had done
Canadian teen.
Yeah,
Hannah.
I heard about that.
Yeah. And she has some true like erotic writing. And I had like done like a deep teenage, like, oh my God, I can't be allowed to be reading this dive into Anne Rice. So I really knew her work and I had loved her vampires. And I like some horror and some romance. I was just like, wow, I'm all in. Like, you know, I couldn't imagine a better show.
Yeah. It's interesting. You know, as someone who loves genre, one of my first scripts was about Black zombies. Wow. I love putting Black people in the genre stuff because growing up, they weren't.
Talk about
You know what I mean? Like, it was always like first to die, if at all, right? If they were there at all. So I was so excited for this. What my litmus test was, actually, or what I guess felt to me like, they know. It was their mother. It was Louis, Grace's, and Paul's mother. And the way she talked to them, I said, okay, somebody taught them about Black mama drama. They learned the rules from the source. But at the same time, like Kalyne, and be honest, okay, and Hannah's Canadian, so she's automatically more trustworthy than your average Caucasian.
Okay.
How did, you know, you're in here, you know, the showrunner is white. You're telling a new version of a story that was white, right, when it was first done. Were you nervous at all? Or were you kind of, or rather self-conscious? Like, okay, we have to do this right, or what does it look like to do this way?
Absolutely. I think I felt so many things. A huge responsibility to, first of all, learn and dive deep into the Creole culture and to free people of color and that culture and history. And let's be clear, this is a whole community and history that I didn't learn in school. So actually, this show gave me the gift to dive deeper into a part of my history that I had no idea. The intricacies and the beautiful like music and swagger and all that was happening in that time in Storyville and New Orleans in general. So I felt a lot of pressure to honor those people and to help them feel seen. And I think every step of the way, I wanted to be sure that I could have conversations about relationships, about Black people, about Blackness during this time. Creole folks lived in a sort of in-between. So, they're dealing with colorism, they're dealing with racism, they're dealing with so many different things. So for me, it was always about how can I do the research, do the work, make sure I'm honoring to the best of my ability, and trust that the people around me want to do the same thing. And what I found was that it felt very safe to work on this project, to work with these people, and to combine both what Anne Rice had already created, but deepening it with this new community of people. I truly believe it's explosive in the way that these new characters and the history and the culture that they come with opens up the text in a new way.
Yeah, and honestly, your performance was ridiculous. Like, you're extraordinary as Grace. I really like you write something, but then there's like watching someone elevate it far beyond what you even hoped for. And that is what you did. So
yes, take them flowers, Kaylin.
Yeah,
you
I'm
deserve.
I'm gonna take them because let me tell you, this is my first TV show.
I know.
My first one.
Rollin told me that, and Rollin was like, "You will not believe what happened with Grace, and it is her first show." And I was like, and then I watched it, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Come on, thank you. That means the world to me because, like, with all that I said, I'm also navigating being on a set for the first time.
Yeah.
And that comes with a lot of learning and a lot of like anxiety, but you get more comfortable. And I think that was also a gift of Grace. I got to age and experience as she aged as a person.
Well, I actually wanted to ask that because I did feel like, I said every episode, Grace got a new situation. I said first, Grace get married. Then Grace got some twins. Then Grace going north. And it was like
we're like sprinting through her life. We're like, all the major events, do them all.
Do them all. I mean, how would you approach that though, right? Because these moments are largely happening off screen except for the wedding.
Yeah.
And so, you come into each scene was like, okay, now I have changed this way. How did you envision that change? Were you like, okay, she walking a little different because these kids have got her tired. She's a little less warm because she stopped trusting Louis. You know what I mean? Like, what are some of the things you did to make those changes feel lived in for you?
Yeah, I think, one of the gifts is that I got most of the episodes prior to. So I was really able to track her age and those changes that we're talking about. Of course, there was little changes here and there, but as far as Grace's track, I was really able to focus on what I wanted to come into each episode with. And I had to be clear, like, how many years has it been since I've seen Louis? How many birthdays has he missed? How many celebrations was he not there for? How many letters have I written that he never responded? As far as tracking our relationship. And then, y'all, I have 9 to now 10 nieces and nephews. I know what it feels like to be at your wit's end. I know what it feels like to want that family support around you and sometimes not be able to get it in the way that you need. And Grace had to grow up really fast. And one of the most heartbreaking things is the deterioration of her and Louis' relationship because she has no idea why it's happening. And he's her last family member. So I think for me, it was just making sure that when I walked into each episode, I was clear on what had just happened and I could make those stories personal to me.
Let's listen to a little clip that show Louis and Grace letting go of each other finally.
We're headed north. Crash, clean us out. And don't offer, because I'm not asking. Levy found some work near Boston. We feel blessed for the work.
You look good.
Don't need that either, Louis. Whoever you are that took my Louis.
It's me, Grace.
I said across the dinner table from him my whole life. The pews in St. Augustine's on Sunday. Hid my fourth grade report card on purpose. Because his was so bad and he didn't want our parents to find out. You're not my Louis. You can't be. I prayed myself old, thinking what to do about you. God never talked back, so this is how it has to be. For me. For my family. You understand?
Oh, I'm gutted. Kaylin, honey. Kaylin, right now you're Grace. And I need to know what is going on for Grace in this scene. And who does Grace think Louis is now?
So I think so many things are happening for Grace at the beginning of the scene. You know, she's in her 40s now. It's been like 9 years since she's seen her brother. And before that, it was still strained. And so, you know, I talked to Levin about this, who was the episode 5 director, who was incredibly helpful and asked all the great actor questions. And I don't think she would know that Louis is a vampire. She wouldn't, although New Orleans is a beautifully spiritual place and there's interactions with good and evil energies all the time, I don't think she would know what that essence is or that being is. Mm-hmm. But she does have these facts. He hasn't aged. He's not around anymore. His heart, his spirit, his essence has changed. He's superhuman in strength. Mm-hmm. And there's a darkness about him that wasn't there before. And so I think Grace has tried to her last straw to save their relationship. This is her last living family member. He's all she has left, but he's given her nothing. And so I think at this point, she just has to set her boundaries in order to be the mother and the wife and the human she needs to be, you know, to live her life. And I'll be honest, I think if Louis had fought or if he had said, I'm sorry, here's what's happening, I think Grace could have held space in some way so their relationship could have continued.
We talked about that a lot, too, in the room. And that was what we came to, exactly what you said.
Really?
We came to, like, she doesn't know he's a vampire, but she knows there's something. And it's supernatural, probably. But she doesn't quite know what. And then he doesn't dispute it.
He doesn't say
So she buries him alive.
That's it.
It's like, you know, deciding someone's dead when they're still alive. It's a version of disowning. So it was like, she's going north. She's done. Her whole family is dead because he's something and she doesn't know what. And she's got to let him go, which is to be like, you are dead, just like my mother is dead, just like my brother and my father.
You know, I love that because I think in the book, she is told that he dies in a fire. Mm-hmm. I think he like watches her as an older woman, like visiting his grave. And I love that the writers, you all, gave her the agency to choose the goodbye. And I think that it makes her stronger, I feel, to be able to choose it.
Right. Kaylin, did you see any similarities between Grace and Claudia? There is the moment where, you know, right, Claudia shows up at your mother's funeral, at Mom's funeral. So that's like the only time you meet her.
One of her wishes would have been to be a part of Claudia's life. Because I think a similarity that they have is they both want relationships with Louis in a way that isn't always fulfilled in the way that they want. And I truly believe she would have been a great auntie to Claudia. Definitely. She would have been a great auntie if given the chance, as long as Claudia didn't eat her. I think they would have been fine.
Claudia could have used a Grace in her life.
Yeah, like she's dying for she's dying for a Grace. She's longing for a Grace. Yeah.
This is what me and Bailey talked about on set. We wish we had more scenes together because we were supporting each other from a distance.
Yeah, Claudia needed some loving female energy because life for her two dads has gotten real grim, all locked up in the house together. I call this episode, we got a real Grey Garden situation going on.
Yeah.
Let's listen to a little clip that I think really encapsulates the Grey Gardens vibe.
You wanted her. You fixed her.
And beer and whiskey?
Doing this together.
Do you remember our life? How happy we were before her?
Happy? We were not happy.
An anvil tied around our ankles, pulling us towards the pitch-black ocean floor.
Who am I supposed to love? You two have each other. Who's my Lestat? Who's my Louis? Not humans. What human would want me? How are you
You're not my type. I like a full of figure.
Stop.
She's being impossible.
Why can't I make one? No matter how much blood I give them, they just lie there gasping.
Did you try to make another? Claudia, how'd you figure this was gonna go?
If you could find any, which you won't, they would shred you to strips. Because you are built like a bird. Because you are a mistake.
Woo!
Drama.
Drama. I mean, Hannah, how were you guys kind of conceiving of this dynamic between the three of them, especially once Claudia comes in? Because I think one of the big differences between this adaptation and the book and the movie is that Claudia is older, right? She's 14. And with that comes a desire and a drive and a dangerousness that wasn't the same with a much younger Claudia.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So our Claudia is like a teenager. And so with that comes, the beginning of sexuality. And with that comes a kind of like erratic emotion and volatility. And so that was our Claudia, which is different than the book. Although Anne Rice does get there in Paris. So in a way, we pulled some of what happens with Claudia in Paris, where she's obviously becoming an adult and asking questions about sexuality. We just pulled that a little bit earlier and into the relationship between Louis and Lestat, which gave us it just gives you a really tempestuous character, which was what was so pleasurable to write. And the great pleasure for me of writing on this show is Roland let me write like that clip you just heard.
Mm-hmm.
He let me go all the way into humor and sexuality and darkness. Yay. That's how I want to write that way. If only anyone will give me permission, and Roland does. So.
Yeah, it's funny, you talk about Claudia as tempestuous, but what's funny is because I find Lestat to be so tempestuous. I find him to be such a little dramatic, whiny baby.
Yeah.
And the problem is he got some power. If he could not fly and beat you to a pulp, you'll be like, ew, he's the emo guy at the coffee shop. You know what I mean?
You're so right. I don't know why I'm putting that on Claudia, because out of all of them, Lestat's he's the monster. He's the monster mentor, right?
Yes.
He's the one, he's supposed to be mentoring these two little vampires, and all he does is fuck them up,
Let me tell you, I be talking back to this screen. There is a moment in this scene when they do their reunion, and then he stops the record player and is so petty. Oh, he's like, oh, Claudia's back. Let me tell you, they played that role. I was like, no, you didn't. Stop being petty.
I know. Lestat is just here for the biggest reaction to everything. Even his response here, when he's being funny, which is I prefer a fuller figure. It's okay, Tu Wong Fu, calm down. You don't need to give us a zinger every time.
I know. Well, and that's why, honestly, he's so fun to write, because he always says the shittiest, meanest, most fucked up thing in every scene. And so to get to write that is it's always so fun to write the devil.
It's a good outlet. It keeps you pleasant.
Yeah.
Because it's you get to write that and then you'll be like, okay. Now, to shift to an even darker moment, there is an implied assault in this episode where Claudia is assaulted by Bruce, another vampire. And my question, Hannah, was, given that this show is violent, it's gory, tell me about the decision to not show us what happened to Claudia to any extent. And I'm going to tell you this. I didn't want to see it. I'm glad you did not. But because, again, the show does show us so much, it felt like a purposeful choice.
Yeah. Do you know, I don't think we ever talked about showing it. We always wanted it to not be shown. And I think there is a logic in a show that is sexual and that shows beautiful sexuality that you don't want to show when sexuality is rape or abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say on the show I worked on, where I'm executive producer before this show, we made the call not to show any sexual assault scenes because it can be traumatizing for people who have experienced sexual assault and doesn't necessarily add to the story other than in a superficial way.
Right. Everything is breaking down. And it certainly ends with, Hannah, can we talk about this fight scene? These multiple fight scenes, honey. We start in the house, we going around, we get up into the sky. You talk about, how, yes, it can be fun to write some of the dark stuff, but what is it like to write these scenes that are obviously so emotional, but also very physical, right?
Yeah. And also, I write plays. I was like, who put me in fucking charge of writing a massive set piece violence fight. I was like, who thought this was a good idea? But there's a huge beauty to writing something that's a culminating scene. And we talked a lot in the story room about like when we were going to reveal that Lestat can fly. And we all came to it together in the writing room. We were like, this is it. Then he flies up into the air. We were all like yelling it at the same time on Zoom. We were like, and then he flies! But like 5 people were yelling it. And then he drops him! Like we were all screaming it as we figured it out. It was a really exciting day in the writing room, actually. And we were like very self-pleased.
Yeah.
Because we were like, yeah. And it's like Paul falling to his death, only he doesn't die. You know, we were like freaking out.
Oh, okay. Now you just gave me a connection I didn't put together. Okay. See, these playwrights, Kaylin, these playwrights, they operate on the level.
The way they be. Yeah. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
For me, it was like a huge delight.
Right. But then also, again, because I'm so petty with Lestat, the way he's like, I'm going to fly you in the air.
Oh, yeah.
Hold your mangled body and be like, just tell me you don't love me. It's like, Lestat, honey.
I know.
This is not the time. Like, if you needed a boost, it was not going to come now. Okay?
Maybe like don't beat me to a pulp and then ask me if I love you.
Exactly. Oh my God. Do you think Louis actually does love Lestat?
You know, I honestly feel like I have to hold on that because I'm scared of spoilers.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. That's tantalizing. Yeah.
Ooh, right? I would say yes, he does. I think that it evolves into something else, and now they're eternally connected. I think it's abusive. I think that it's terrible. It's also beautiful in some ways. And so it's just really very complicated. But I do think that there is and was love at some point, you know? It's just complicated.
Yeah. Okay, my very last question. I would like us to end with a little segment called A Little Taste, which, you know, is what vampires are all about.
Okay.
Now, without giving away any spoilers, can either of you give us a little taste of what's to come in future episodes? We just got a couple more after this. Is there a little hint, a little something you want people to look out for? Hannah, you can tell us as a riddle, in the form of a riddle, if you don't want to give it away.
I mean, what's to come in 106? This next episode is like a fucking beast. I just can't wait. It's like a psychological game, this next episode. I'm super interested in and excited for the audience to like hit the 106 of it.
You know, I think there is nothing left to be said. That sounds... I'm going to leave it to the writers in the room, okay?
Yes, y'all, strap in for 106. Kaylin, Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me all things 105.
This was so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi.